Hello, it's Fabian with you again on another video tutorial regarding the 80cc Chinese two-stroke motorized bicycle engine. Today we're going to be discussing problems that can occur when a pull start is attached to the engine. And typically you will have a situation where you just simply cannot get rid of an intermittent spark miss. It feels like a dirty spark plug or a damaged CDI or a damaged coil or whatever it might be, but it has that typical sparky type miss that doesn't matter what you try and do, you just simply cannot get rid of the miss. You can change all of the electrical system and the miss will still persist. This has happened to me and it took me a while to diagnose it, but it really is a simple problem. And it all starts with the pull start driver and the magnet. So we can have a look at the pull start driver, which is there. So there's this little device. And the two tangs that you can see there are designed to fit into the magnet, like so. So when torque is applied to the pull start, it tries to rotate this drum, which then tries to turn the magnet. The magnet then transfers torque through the keyway, which is this little device here. You have the keyway. The keyway then sits in the slot of the crankshaft, the machine woodruff slot. It sits in there like so. So I've now just loosely set it in there. And all the torque that is applied on the pull start is transferred via the magnet, via the keyway and the magnet, through the woodruff key, and then the woodruff key is solely responsible for transferring all of that torque to the crankshaft. For the most part, with a low compression cylinder head, there isn't a problem. So long as you bring the engine over top dead center before you try and crank the engine, you will not have a problem. However, if you have a very high compression cylinder head, occasionally, even when you pull the engine over top dead center and then go to pull start the engine, sometimes the compression is so high that you'll move around through a full rotation of the crankshaft, and then the compression will simply stop the piston from moving any further, and all of a sudden the pull start will just completely come to a stop and you'll virtually lift the bike off the ground. Now all of that torque is going through that little woodruff key and the crankshaft. So you keep doing that a couple of times, and what ends up happening is partially the woodruff key starts to flog out, and then the slot in the crankshaft starts to flog out. So you end up with a situation where this slot here starts to widen out, or it starts to flare out on the edges, which then allows the magnet, and also incidentally it starts to flare out the inside edges of the keyway of the magnet. So now instead of the magnet sitting in correct alignment with the crankshaft, so in this case here I've just simply put the crankshaft keyway at top dead center just for simplicity's sake. So now we're going to take the magnet keyway at top dead center, and we're just going to put it on there like that, thereabouts, just for simplicity's sake. So when the slot in the crankshaft starts to flog out, and the woodruff key starts to flog out a little bit, and the keyway and the magnet start to flog out, what ends up happening is the magnet starts to rotate around the crankshaft. So instead of the magnet being in the correct position, because it's flogged out, you end up with all of this slop between the keyway, the woodruff key, and the keyway and the magnet. So let's say, for example, that was the correct position. Now, because of all the torque being applied and the damage that's occurred, the magnet can now sit, for example, in this position. The problem with that is the timing, or the spark timing, is determined by the correct position between the crankshaft and the magnet. There's two parts of a magnet. You have the north pole and you have the south pole. So on one of the poles, I would assume it be the north pole, it generates a current, which then charges up the capacitors in the CDI. And from that point, the triggering of the CDI, I believe, happens on the south pole. So now, because this here is not in correct alignment anymore, the triggering or the charging of the capacitors in the CDI is altered. And I've found that it didn't take a lot for it to completely stuff the triggering on the CDI. And below around about 3000 RPM, I was having no end of dramas with spark miss. I couldn't work out what was going on. I tried several different engines. I tried completely replacing the electrical system, including the magneto coil, the coil itself, the CDI, the spark plug boot, the spark plug lead, everything. I did this 3 times, and I put 3 different engines into it. And each time I kept putting the same magnet and the same Woodruff key onto it, because my engines were partially assembled. So I just simply pulled an engine out, replaced the magnet, replaced the keyway, and away I went. And the same problem kept reoccurring over and over and over again. So in desperation, I replaced the magnet and I replaced the keyway, and lo and behold, the spark miss completely disappeared. So this is something to take into consideration. If you're having spark miss issues that you just simply cannot fix, and you've tried replacing the entire electrical system and it just keeps replicating, where it doesn't matter what you try and do on the electrical side, you can't fix it, I suggest that, especially if you have a pull start, that you look at the magnet and you also look at the keyway. Typically what will happen, if it's really flogged out, this part here in the crankshaft will be damaged. So even if you put a new keyway into it, it's still not going to 100% solve the problems. It might make it a heck of a lot better, but the actual end result of pull starting it and damaging this machined relief is effectively the crankshaft here is damaged. So the only real method of properly solving the problem is to replace the crankshaft. The problem with that is the whole engine has to come apart just to replace the crankshaft, so you can now get a sound keyway slot. So I hope that's been of help, and I will see you again next time on the next video tutorial. Thank you.